Okay, so the last use really of price elasticity is for the government. And I've seen some really good questions where it's been an essay where they've actually asked, discuss the usefulness of price elasticity demand to a firm, which is the other videos that we've been looking at, and to a government. And this is the video that we're looking at now. Okay, so the first thing that we've got to think about is what's going to happen when a supply curve gets shifted. So here we've got a supply curve, and you need to remember that a supply curve says that this is what the firm is willing and able. So effective supply, really important that you get this idea. Effective supply, they're willing and they are able to supply at that price. So at this price here, they're willing and able to supply that quantity there. And the reason for that is that they've added up their costs. And they said, well, these are the costs, so if you give me that price, I will be willing to supply that quantity to you. Okay? Now, the government need to know the PED if they're going to put a tax on. So what actually happens with a tax goes on a good. So this is the old price that the firm is willing and able to supply at. And a tax like a VAT, for example, is going to shift the supply curve upwards. So basically the way that you have to think of a tax is that the firm put the higher tax and they put that into their price, and then they are literally collecting that tax and they're passing it over to the government. So they don't keep that tax, and so it becomes like a cost of production, if you like, to the firm. That's the way that you've got to think about it. So they charge the higher price, but they still receive the old price because they pass on that tax. So basically, the question you're asking here is, if the government are going to put a tax on a good, do they want to have an elastic or an inelastic? Well, let's see over here what happens to the supply curve with a tax on it. So the first thing that happens is, as I say, the firm was willing and able to supply at that point, and then we say that they're going to be willing and able to supply at this price because that's the tax that they've got to pass over to the government. So they're not keeping that, they'll charge the customer that, and then they'll keep the old price again. So there'll be another video on this, the effect of tax in a marketplace. So the new supply curve with a tax is higher. It's like they've added a cost to the firm basically, and so it's shifted the supply curve upwards or backwards to the left. I prefer to call it upwards by the amount of the tax. So in this case, it would be a specific tax. It's like £10 on whatever output they're producing. Okay, so go back to the question then. Will the government rather have an elastic or an inelastic PED? Remember, they want to cut the demand usually when they put taxes on a good, okay, because it's cigarettes, alcohol, fuel, etc. Okay, so have a think about that. Do they want elastic or inelastic? Well, let's have a look. This is the old supply curve. This is the supply curve with the tax. This is the old equilibrium price. We're going to put in now some demand curves. If the government want to cut the amount of demand, then do they want to have an elastic demand or would they have inelastic demand? So let's think. That's elastic demand, and you can see that with this is the new equilibrium. So with elastic PED, the price has gone up by a small amount in the market, but it has given them that big fall in the quantity that they need to that they're looking to get in the market. Okay, so how does that compare to an inelastic demand curve, PED? The price is going to go up by a lot more, but the demand is only going to go down by a small amount. So the answer really is that they would prefer to have an elastic PED because they're cutting the demand for the good by a lot by only raising the price by a little. But one of the big issues here is for things like tobacco, alcohol, etc. We have, because they're addictive, the PED tends to be inelastic, and so it's not a good policy for the government to introduce to cut the amount of alcohol and tobacco and that sort of thing. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful for the use of a PED for a government.